For this test, I was running my Ryzen 7 9800X3D tuned with the plus 200 MHz boost clock override and a minus 40 undervolt to get the most out of the chip. It's paired with 64GB of DDR5 at 6000 sealed 30 with tightened secondary and tertiary timings. If you want all the tuning details on the system, check out the link in the upper right hand corner. Storage is handled by a Gen 5 Aorus 10K M2, and everything is running on a Gigabyte X670E Aorus Extreme motherboard. The 5070 Ti is an MSI Shadow 3X overclock model, and the 5070 is a Gigabyte WindForce. I pushed the graphics settings as high as possible in each game and tested at both 1440 and 4K native. Most competitive players won't run games this maxed out, they'll be lowering settings for better FPS, but here we're focusing on raw GPU capability to get a clear comparison between the two cards. Think of it like comparing cars on a racetrack. Each game is like a different racetrack, and the performance results or the FPS numbers are like lap times. They give us a solid way to compare relative performance, but they're not meant to predict exactly what FPS you'll get in your personal setup or your preferred settings. So keep that in mind as we dive into the benchmark. These are controlled, maxed out scenarios meant to highlight the true performance gap between the 5070 Ti and 5070. Starting with League of Legends at 1440, both cards performed extremely well. The 5070 Ti averaged 603 FPS versus 598 on the 5070. The 1% lows are basically identical at 475 versus 474, and the 0.1% lows basically identical as well. Both cards are reaching the CPU max at 1440. In 4K, the 5070 Ti pulls ahead slightly. The average FPS is 565 versus 542, a 4% gain. 1% lows improved by about 5%, and 0.1% lows by about 2.5%. It's a small bump, but again, both cards are running LOL effortlessly in both resolutions. In CS2 and 1440, the 5070 Ti shows a more meaningful uplift. The average FPS is 308 versus 266, that's about a 15.8% boost. 1% lows improved by 8.7%, and 0.1% lows by 12.6%. In 4K, the difference is even larger. The Ti hits 170 FPS compared to 135 on the 5070. It's a 26% increase. The 1% lows are 24% better, and 0.1% lows are up by 15%. In the Hunt Showdown in 1440, the 5070 Ti averaged 92 FPS versus 68. On the 5070, that's a 35% increase. The 1% and 0.1% lows are over 34% better as well. This game had the most significant difference between the two. The game felt much smoother on the Ti. In 4K, the Ti maintains its lead, 54 FPS versus 41, a 32% bump. 1% lows jump by nearly 29%, and 0.1% lows a huge 54%. In this title, the 5070 Ti genuinely offers a better experience. In Marvel Rivals in 1440 Ultra, the Ti hits 86 FPS versus 76 on the 5070. That's a 13% uplift. 1% lows improved by 18.5%, and 0.1% lows by 22%. Clear win for the Ti here, but the 5070 is still very capable. In 4K, the gap widens again. The Ti averages 54 versus 45, a 20% increase. 1% lows are actually 55.6% better, and 0.1% lows are up by 29.4%. Finally, in DayZ in 1440 Extreme, the 5070 Ti averages 110 FPS, up from 93 on the 5070. That's an 18% boost. 1% lows are up by around 11%, and 0.1% lows are up by around 15%. In 4K, the 5070 Ti holds a small lead at 54 versus 48 on the 5070. It's about 13% more. 1% lows are up by about 12%, and 0.1% lows are up by about 7.5%. In terms of power efficiency, the 5070 averaged about 50 watts less than the 5070 Ti across all of the testing here. Despite the lower power draw, temperatures stayed very close between the two cards, averaging 59 on the 5070 and 61 on the 5070 Ti, just about a 3% difference. Performance-wise, the 5070 Ti delivered anywhere from 15 to 30% higher frame rates depending on the game and resolution, and it did so with roughly 30% more power draw. Both GPUs were tested using stock fan profiles and remained quiet during operation, with no noticeable noise difference between the two. So, is it worth upgrading to the 5070 Ti for these multiplayer games? When there's enough GPU headroom, the Ti does deliver about 15 to 30% more performance across the titles that we tested here. So let's bring price into the equation. As of May 4th, 2025, the lowest priced readily available 5070 is the WindForce model at $605. Stock on the 5070 seems to be pretty solid these days. Meanwhile, the 5070 Ti is just starting to come back onto shelves, but affordable models still sell out pretty quickly. The Ventus 3X has been fairly easy to find over the past week at around $900. So So if we use those prices, we're looking at a nearly 50% increase in cost for at most maybe a 30-ish% bump in performance. As you move up the GPU ladder, the price to performance ratio starts to drop off, and I think the 5070 Ti marks the transition point between mainstream and high-end GPUs. The 5070 gives you overall better value and very good performance in 1440, while the 5070 Ti does offer higher performance and more power. It does so at a higher cost per frame. Alright, that's all I got for this one. If you found this comparison helpful, you might also want to check out my benchmark comparison playlist. Got a ton of different hardware comparisons in there. If you got something out of this video, consider dropping a like and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and keeps content like this coming. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.